Good afternoon, everyone, and as usual, good morning or good evening for those coming from other time zones. Thank you for joining us. I am Raquel Miguel. I'm part of the EU DisinfoLab's research team, and I will be moderating today our session titled Mapping Manipulation, How the FIMI Exposure Matrix Sharpens Attribution and Reveals Connection. Today we have a renowned member of our community and familiar face in EU DisinfoLab's webinars. Beatriz Marin will present the third report published by the European External Action Service on FIMI threats. Beatriz, thank you for accepting our invitation. But let me start by reminding our audience that we are a non-profit organization gathering knowledge and expertise on disinformation in Europe, and we host webinars regularly with the aim of giving voice to the experts in the field and to give visibility to the excellent work that is being done by many. Apart from these webinars, we also host a fantastic annual conference that this year will take place in Ljubljana, in Slovenia, the 15th and 16th of October. The open registration is available, and the deadline for the early bird tickets is ending on the 27th, that is next Tuesday. So that's why we highly encourage you to register as soon as possible, secure your spot, and take advantage of the better rates. You can find all the information on our website. And before delving into the topic, let me remind you a few housekeeping rules that may already sound familiar to our recurring audience. First, this session is being recorded and the playback will be available shortly on our YouTube channel. Second, over the past couple of weeks, our webinars have featured a new tool that allows attendees to subtitle the conversation in their preferred language. The goal is that the knowledge shared here is accessible to the widest audience possible. All you have to do is go to the caption section, the option marked with CC, located at the bottom left. Click on the tab, enable the translation option, and select your desired language. It's very simple. You can see this process on the screen. And as usual, disclaimer, please be aware that artificial intelligence is involved in this process of transcription and translation, and that the subtitles won't always be perfect. And last but not least, for communication purposes and for the Q&A session, we will use Slido. You can open the app on your phone by scanning the QR code you currently see on the screen, or type slido.com in your web browser, and when requested, add the hashtag disinfo. Now, to get you comfortable with this tool, I invite you to answer 2 questions on Slido. Please tell us where are you joining us from today and which sector you represent. Quick reminder for the latecomers, slido.com, hashtag disinfo. And again, please don't use the chat on Zoom because your questions or comments can be overlooked. I'll give you a minute to answer. And maybe remember as well that you don't have to wait until the end to submit your questions. You can send them whenever you like during the presentation, and we will do our best to address them all during the Q&A session. Okay, let's have a look at the audience. We have many places there. A lot of people joining from Brussels, Berlin as well. Hello, Helsinki, Zurich, the Netherlands, Milano, Paris, DC, the other side of the Atlantic, Switzerland, Washington, Toronto, and Vilnius. For now, UK, hello. Now maybe let's have a look at the second question. Okay, 50-50, no. The most part of the attendees are working for non-government organizations, but also researchers from academia, business, media, and EU institutions as well. Okay, that's great. Good to know that our audience comes from different backgrounds and locations as well. And yeah, all right, thank you for your patience and for bearing with this long introduction. And now let's go to the topic at hand. Our speaker today, Beatriz Marin, is team leader of the EEAS data knowledge and analysis. Her team specializes in developing and implementing data-driven strategies to analyze and counter foreign information manipulation and interference, the so-called FIMI, and has published also reports on identity-based disinformation. As you know, FIMI has been as well one of our fields of research. We have published several reports on different FIMI operations, such as Doppelganger. And it was the European External Action Service who guided the community with this new concept in a first extensive report published in 2022, explaining a new approach that moves away from disinformation to look beyond the content, especially into the TTPs, the tactics, techniques, and procedures used for information manipulation. This paradigm change had many repercussions for research and for countermeasures, as shown in a second report. In 2023, they proposed as well a standardized methodology for FIMI analysis, including a model for data sharing standards to facilitate information exchange within the FIMI defenders community. And after defining FIMI and exploring responses and standardized analysis, the EEAS recently took a methodological leap in its latest report that Beatriz brings us today. The core of this report is the FIMI Exposure Matrix, a very catchy name, which is in fact a major step forward for the attribution of influence operations. It introduces a 4-tier classification of information channels, and this allows a more structured and confident manner to identify the actors behind the operations and to make attributions. Another aspect worth mentioning from the report is the way it unpacks the growing connections between Russian and Chinese influence operations. Congrats to you and your team, Beatriz, for this fantastic report. On a more personal level, in addition to the EEAS, Beatriz has an extensive background. She has worked as well in DG Communication and DG Connect in the European Commission, and she has a background in sociology and communication analysis. Without further ado, let's invite Beatriz to speak. Looking forward to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Raquel, and thank you very much, colleagues, the EU DisinfoLab, to invite us again to present the work that we are doing in the European External Action Service. I wanted to start with, a bit of the timeline of reports that we published, but Raquel, you already tackled many of these things with your wonderful introduction. So I will not spend that much time on this. It's true that we identified some years ago a lack of understanding between different members of the community, or what we call now the FIMI defenders community, where we lacked a bit of standardization to try to align better the terminology that we were using. And like this, if we all align in certain things, and we are able to build more as a community and create knowledge together. So this is a bit the evolution of the reports that we published in the EEAS. The first one more explaining this conceptual approach on how can we analyze, detect, and share information related to FIMI. In the second report, we wanted to connect. We know that having a better situational awareness is a part of the counter-FIMI strategy that as a community we have, but we need to create situational awareness connected to other types of responses. So in this second report last year, we tried to focus on, okay, now we know how to analyze, let's see how can we counter disinformation or FIMI specifically. And in the second report is where we mentioned, we published what probably some of you know is the FIMI toolbox. So this catalog of responses that we have at different levels with different members of the community in order to adapt better our responses depending on the type of attack that we analyzed using this standardized methodology. And this year, We are publishing a third report. We always include, and you will see kind of an annual overview of the activities that we detected and analyzed, but also we wanted to bring a new ingredient to this methodology. It's something that it was already introduced in the first report, but we didn't explain at large. And also it builds a connection between the first and the second report, because what's new in this third report is what we call the FIMI Exposure Matrix, and it's a system that can be used to improve the monitoring, to improve the detection, the classification of sources, but also once we collect the evidences, it helps us to classify these sources according to the level of connection that they can have to a threat actor. And therefore, this helps us to better design the counter strategies. Also, and I will explain during the presentation in this third report, also one of the flagships is the what we call the FIMI, the galaxy of FIMI operations, that it's a network graph where for the first time we tried to connect all the different channels that we saw on FIMI activities, and we see how they belong to different operations, different campaigns that have been largely exposed by other partners and other governments. So with this introduction, I will start by briefly mentioning which are the key elements that we saw, or the key trends of 2024 in these efforts in the EEAS to monitor and detect FIMI. Last year in our team we detected 505 incidents of FIMI, those inside the EU, but also outside the EU, because the scope that we have, it's also covering other regions of the world. We know, and by this, we don't want to say that this covers all the FIMI activity in the world, because this is just a sample that we were able to detect. But well, I think it gives us already a nice snapshot on how big and the scale of FIMI operations. Also, by the figures that we are able to extract from these 500 incidents, we see that FIMI is a threat at a global scale. There are 90 countries in our cases that they have been targeted, and also these incidents they targeted more than 300 organizations around the world. When it comes more to the topics or narratives that have been exploited by threat actors, we saw how, again, Ukraine remained the main target of Russian FIMI attacks with two different objectives. The first one was to weaken the country's resistance to Russia's full-scale invasion. So it was more targeting Ukrainian audiences. But then, on the other hand, we had other type of incidents that they target more at a global scale, basically trying to attack Western allies, including NATO, the G7, EU countries, with a particular focus in the EU on Germany and Poland, trying to weaken the support of these countries or these organizations to Ukraine. And we know that last year, and not last year, we already see that this year, again, there are plenty of elections, and we see how elections are normally a major target for FIMI activities. And in the sample of the analysis, we included, for example, the European elections, also the elections, some of them happening outside the EU, like Moldova and the EU referendum in Moldova. And another trend is that we saw that France was particularly one of the countries with more attacks for two reasons. Also because they had the French legislative elections, but the Olympic Games last year were also a major event targeted by FIMI activities. When it comes to the techniques, we see that FIMI is a cross-platform activity. Very rarely we find incidents that they just happen in one platform or in one set of websites. Normally the content or the campaign includes the diversification of content in multiple fronts at the same time. We also saw how emerging platforms last year, like Blue Sky, were already being integrated in this landscape of FIMI operations. We also saw how more often threat actors use artificial intelligence to create content, to automate certain activities. It's more, we know, cost effective when it comes to the creation of content. However, we cannot assess yet if this usage of AI translates directly into a greater impact of FIMI activities in the audiences. And another relevant point that we observed is how one really specific technique covered a big part of this media landscape or the architecture used to channel FIMI operations. In these 505 incidents, we detected 38,000 unique channels involved in these activities. And 73% of these 38,000 unique channels were actually CIBs, were disposable accounts, were single burner accounts, fake accounts, bots that are used once to inflate and promote content, but then they are directly deleted or suspended, or they are not activated anymore. So we see that a big part of the infrastructure used to actually deliver FIMI attacks, it's a disposable infrastructure that after one incident has been posted or delivered, then it's not used anymore. Before I enter into the explanation of what's this FIMI exposure matrix, I would like to explain one example that for sure you are aware of it. It's from last year. But I think it's a good example to show in one case how this classification of outlets work. This is an example that happened in March last year. There is a newly created YouTube channel that posts a video claiming that Ukrainian President Zelensky bought a villa from King Charles III. Directly, the content of this video in some hours, it's taken by a website called London Crier, and they write a complete article about this news. And we see how in the following hours there are different Telegram accounts that, in our case, we knew that somehow they were connected to the Russian infrastructure. And these Telegram channels, they were reposting the content of this article from London Crier in a coordinated way, trying to amplify the reach. And then suddenly in the next 2 days, we see how again the content that was published by this website reaches media outlets that we know that they have links, and some of them belong directly to the landscape, to the Russian infrastructure of media outlets. The last amplification of this article, it's then by diplomatic accounts of the Russian MFA, that they explain the story, and they quote British media behind the origin of this piece of news. This could be just a mistake, a case that because these media outlets, they did not verify very well the information, they end up amplifying a fact that it's not real. The problem is that what if this is not an isolated case? What if this is a systematic pattern? And like this example, there are hundreds where these same channels that we see in this specific case, they constantly launder content from outlets or channels that they have a suspicious origin, and they launder the information until they give more legitimacy to this content via the amplification of more well-known brands or sources. And at the same time, we see how these same outlets, they work and they operate in the reverse direction. They take content from a state-controlled media, they launder and they hide the origin of this content, and they help to amplify and to penetrate this content into local audiences. So this concrete example, this website, London Courier, it's part of Storm 1516, also known as false facade, also including investigations of copycop. So we know that it's part of a larger network of websites, of inauthentic websites that try to mimic Western outlets. And we know that it's a pattern. It's not just one case. So with this example, we wanted to explain that at the end, the FIMI ecosystem, it's composed by different layers. In these different layers, we have always channels that repetitively have the same behavior, and they have a role in the creation of content or in the amplification of content. So we needed to find categories to really describe and put and place these channels on a category to prove their connection to a threat actor, in this case, in the example, Russia. So the FIMI Exposure Matrix is this system that helps us to classify sources. It can be used as a start of the monitoring, because if since the beginning we classify the sources, then when we monitor, we know already which is the connection that this source might have to a threat actor. So we are not blind just looking for stories that then we have to attribute. But also it helps us to create these concrete categories based on technical and behavioral patterns. So with this, I would like to reinforce the idea that sometimes when we see attributions, or that we see that just sometimes because we don't use the proper language, or because we don't have more information, but we call outlets like pro-Chinese or pro-Russian or pro another actor. What do we mean by that? That they have that they are just replicating or having a narrative that is similar to the narrative of a state, or there is something else? Because it's not illegal. I mean, it's totally legit if there is one user or one media outlet that they at some point on one specific topic, they have the same narrative than another actor, but it becomes problematic if they share the same infrastructure, if this is a repetitive pattern. So that's why we wanted to create this categorization system based on this repetition of TTPs and also technical patterns. And also, if you know the paper that was written, I think now 3 years ago by James Pamment and Victoria Smith on how to attribute influence operations. So this criteria, it drinks a lot from the idea of that paper, that we need to define concrete indicators, evidences that will help us. In that paper, it helps us to attribute. For us, in some cases, we can attribute, but basically it's just to have a classification. So in this, what we call the FIMI iceberg, we have 4 categories, 2 that are covered, that are overt channels. So that means that these are channels that they have transparent links to a state. We would have official channels or websites of a government, also channels of representatives of the government, diplomatic accounts. Then as a second layer, we would have state-controlled outlets that are media outlets, that they are openly funded by a state. And then we have a dimension that it's these networks that they also help to amplify content from state channels or state-controlled channels and launder the information. And this also gives us the idea on how FIMI at the end, when we talk about FIMI, it's also a hybrid threat, because these operations, they happen under the surface. There is an intent to create suspicious, to hide the origin and the links of these operations with the state. So in this covered part of the iceberg, we will have two extra categories. One that are state link channels, so these channels that they have been attributed. So even though they don't have transparent links with the state, we have enough evidence, not just from open source investigations, but also work or revelations that journalists, investigative journalists can do, also information from intel services that at some point it's public, or also revelations that platforms can do when they have access to proprietary data. So these are channels that we know that for sure they belong to the infrastructure of the threat actor. It's just that there is an intent to hide this connection, therefore it's unattributed but covered. And then as a fourth category, we would have the rest of channels that they also have technical and behavioral patterns that are repeated in a systematic way to connect the different parts of the iceberg, but they have not been attributed. And with this means that we don't have evidence for the time being to attribute them, and we will need to gather more evidence, or even if right now we don't have enough evidence to attribute them, we can prove that they systematically play a role in the transmission or generation of FIMI content. Also, if you have more interest on specifically the which are these indicators, in the report you have more information. As I said, there is we try to gather technical and behavioral. So of course not all of these indicators they have the same value. There are some that they have a higher confidence level than others, and for the ones that there is this evidence is that they have maybe a lower confidence level, we need to combine them. So it's possible that not just because we find one pattern of coordination, we can directly attribute this source, but with the combination of these patterns or of these TTPs or indicators, then over time we'll be able to place in the correct category the channel. So also the idea that the classification is something that is dynamic. We can start with one classification that then over time it will change because we compile more evidences and we have more knowledge regarding the infrastructure and the behavior of these channels. And applying this classification and these indicators, basically this is just an example. We know that it's not an exhaustive list of channels, but how we could place the different brands on the Russian and Chinese ecosystem according to these categories in the exposure matrix. Using this classification system in the 505 incidents that we detected last year, we were able to create what we call the galaxy of FIMI operations. As I mentioned before, out of these 500 incidents, we detected 38,000 channels involved. What you see on the screen, it's not the activities of 38,000. This represents the activities of 2,000 channels, but the 2,000 that are the most active. So we cleaned the graph. We took out the CIBs that I mentioned before that represents 73% of the overall network. And also we took out the channels that they just interacted once or in one case. So here what you can see on the screen are channels that they have been involved in FIMI activity more than once. The nodes represent channels. So a channel could be a website, it could be a profile on a social media platform. So that's why, for example, for Sputnik Africa and for others, you will see that there are two nodes. There are more, so that means that one same brand, like in this case, it could be Sputnik Africa, can have 5 different channels, one belonging to each social media platform or website. The size of the node represents the amount of connections, so the amount, the participation in incidents. So if it's bigger, it means that it participated in more incidents. And then the edges, the connection between different dots of the network, is the participation in incidents. So if we have 2 nodes that are connected by one edge, it means that these 2 nodes participated in the same incident. So like this is how we have this connection of different networks. In blue, we see the channels that have been or that are attributed to the Chinese ecosystem. So if you remember the iceberg, this would refer to categories 1, 2, and 3. In red is the same for the Russian infrastructure. So channels in the category 1, 2, and 3 that are attributed to the Russian infrastructure. And then in gray is where we have this cloud of outlets, so the category 4 in the iceberg, that we know that they play a role, and this is the proof that there are some patterns of repetition, but these are channels that they don't have, they have not been attributed yet. I think there are plenty of we could zoom in plenty of different parts of this iceberg, but in general trends, we would say that is the first time that we are able to place together different campaigns or different investigations. For example, we have the connections between false facade with portal combat, also the combinations and the connections with African initiative. Also, we see doppelganger that are more isolated in the graph, and they play their own role without interacting too much with other attributed or other campaigns. Then we will have also some more in the left side of the graph. We will have some nodes where that they connect the Russian and the Chinese infrastructure. So they work as bridges between 2 actors. And then we'll have also other type of nodes, like what we call booster nodes, that these are channels that are not attributed, that they play a crucial role when it comes to the amplification on or in this laundering, content laundering from attributed sources to or the usage of this non-attributed to launder content that comes from attributed sources. And then basically these booster nodes or the gray area, they translate this content to penetrate the content more locally in different regions of the world. Maybe I will just explain really briefly some of the campaigns, because I'm conscious of time, and also I will be happy to answer to your questions. But we saw, besides these interactions between threat actors, so this reciprocal amplification sometimes between Russia and China, and more in this gray area of the dots in the network, we can identify these more covert operations. And in the report, we just put kind of because we know that there are plenty of good work done by partners and by colleagues, and they did extensive investigations specifically just on doppelganger or on Storm 1516. Our goal, it was just to extract the main indicators and connect them. So in the graph, we describe basically so the activities of doppelganger. We have 228 domains, also including 25,000 CIBs operating in 9 languages, and a bit the role that they have. As I said, it's a multi-layered operation that they create their own content. So they work in a kind of a self-contained cluster, that they don't interact too much in the same incidents where we have actively the involvement of attributed channels. Then we'll have other campaigns like false facade or copy-cop or Storm 1516, that there are 230 websites in 3 languages. They try to mimic Western media outlets. And this is really a central node of disinformation laundering strategy. So they take content from attributed or from state-controlled media outlets, they translate and they re-amplify somewhere else, but also they take content from other, for example, the case that we saw with the villa of Zelensky, they also take content from non-attributed outlets, and they help that disinformation reaches attributed outlets. Then we have also, of course, Portal Compact. We have more than 200 websites in 35 languages. This is a key operation to translate content into even regional languages. So this is a key aspect to basically take the content and replace the content into other media information environments. And also we see how, for example, Portal Compact amplifies content previously published by False Facade. And also they do the same, for example, for African Initiative. African Initiative is another of the campaigns described in the report, 16 websites in 6 languages. And they act as a bridge between the Russian core infrastructure with more local or African networks. And when it comes to the zoom-ins, if we look from left to right in the big graph, the first explanation that we have it's a case of influence for hire used by the Chinese infrastructure. Basically, we have how there are companies that deploy large networks or clusters of inauthentic websites that they also try to mimic Western outlets to give legitimacy. And the role of these websites or inauthentic websites is to take content from attributed outlets like Global Times or Xinhua and launder the content and re-amplify the information. Another case that we explain in the report, it's dedicated to Moldova. So with the next 2 zoom-ins, this one on Moldova and the next one on Africa, we wanted to explain how Russia opportunistically use events, geopolitical events, but in this case we talk about elections, to redirect part of the existing infrastructure, but at the same time to increase the presence online by the creation of new networks that they want to stay and to continue enlarging the media landscape that they have in those regions. In the case of Moldova, we see the activation of the ecosystem during the elections in 3 different ways, let's say. The first one is, again, as I explained, this strategic reallocation of the infrastructure, first using channels, including official channels from the MFA or diplomatic accounts that they already existed. So they use these accounts to have an aggressive message or narratives targeting Moldova related to the elections. At the same time, they redeploy channels that before they were targeting Ukraine, and now they target Moldova. So we see it specifically with Ukraine, in one of the nodes in the graph, that before it was trying to penetrate in the Ukrainian landscape and also trying to promote anti-Ukrainian narratives, and then suddenly it becomes a channel that tries to reach Moldovan audiences using and reusing narratives that were before used to target Ukraine. And besides this recycling, let's say, of existing infrastructure, they also created new assets to penetrate local spaces. And they did it, for example, through the creation of new domains embedded into the Portal Compact, so the Pravda network infrastructure, specifically in Russian and Romanian speaking or in Romanian languages. Also, they developed new brands or localized brands of the big brands, like, for example, Sputnik Moldova. And at the same time, they also created new channels and new infrastructure, in this case MD24, that it was suspended and also exposed by the intelligence services of Moldova. In this case, all of these channels involved in the infrastructure, they try to sabotage the EU enlargement process, portraying the European Union as a threat to Moldovan economic and political sovereignty. Also allegations of fraud, also trying to delegitimize the leadership of Moldova. This also recycling of past narratives used in Ukraine. And also we could see how they used AI-generated content. They tried to monetize also the manipulation and create or use the falsification of documents, of official documents, to reach local audiences. And the last case that we have in the report, it's really the right side of the galaxy. It's dedicated to the Russian architecture put in place in Africa. After the EU sanctions against RT and Sputnik, but also after geopolitical events in the region and the death of Prigozhin, Russia changed the strategy and the landscape of operations. First, we see how there is an increased effort to create new brands of RT and Sputnik, for example, with Sputnik Afrique or RT Africa. These are brands that were opened after the sanctions against RT and Sputnik. But also we see how African Initiative took over partly the operations of the Wagner Group, to try to connect more this global sphere with the local sphere in some countries in Africa. The activation of this infrastructure happens with 3 layers. The first one is the global. So again, we have channels like the big brands or official channels of the government publishing content that after it's laundered in the first layer by the local branches of these media outlets, is where we have, again, RT France, RT Africa, Sputnik Afrique. And then the third layer in Africa relies a lot on local outlets. And specifically here is where African Initiative has a key role to take the content that has been previously laundered, to launder it even a second time, and penetrate and translate this content into local languages, to penetrate and to reach local audiences, also thanks to local amplifiers in the region. In this case, the narratives used by this ecosystem are normally narratives that they portray the West as a neo-colonial power that exploits African economies. Also, they capitalize a lot on pre-existing anti-Western sentiment. In contrast, they present Russia as an alternative and reliable ally. They also use social and cultural issues to weaponize the society with topics like, for example, gender or LGBTIQ. And well, we see how also, specifically in the context of Africa, how they combine this digital dimension with offline activities. So it's something that it goes beyond what we are able to see in this graph, but there is this combination of offline and online. And with this, I'm open for questions. Thank you, Raquel.
Thank you so much, Beatriz, for showing us this fantastic and visually appealing matrix and galaxy as well, to helping us understand how they work. It's time to start the Q&A session. As a reminder, please use the QR code to join Slido or type slido.com #disinfo. We have around 15 minutes for questions. And at this moment, we are around 60 people in the room. We have already some questions on Slido. Please vote for the ones who you would like to be answered first. And maybe we can start with two questions that are directly related with the matrix per se. How does the FIMI exposure matrix practically differ from the disarm red framework?
I think that, well, these are two different things. The disarm framework help us to extract evidences. So it helps us to categorize the techniques. If you remember the slide where I showed the behavioral and technical evidences, so for example, the behavioral evidences can be cataloged according to disarm. So that means that when we do our analysis, if we identify these techniques that are explained in the disarm framework, then after we can use these evidences to catalog the sources, because we know that if there is certain combination of TTPs, maybe this channel belongs to a group 3 or to a group 4. So let's say that it doesn't have the same objective or the same purpose, but the FIMI exposure matrix relies on a framework that help us to categorize TTPs or to categorize this behavioral aspect of the evidences. So thanks to catalogs or frameworks like the disarm red, then we are able to collect in an objective way the evidences that after will help us to do this classification with the FIMI exposure.
Very clarifying. Thank you, Beatriz. Another very good question refers to the fact that the FIMI exposure matrix can be instrumentalized by actors. How can we ensure that the exposure matrix doesn't become a political tool itself, used to label dissent or alternative narratives as foreign interference?
I think the key aspect is these technical and behavioral indicators. Here we are not talking about the collection of narratives. That's why the example that I mentioned before, it's not that we say that it's pro certain actor because they spread the same narrative. We are saying that it's group 3 or group 4 because they share technical and behavioral patterns, because they use the same TTPs, because they use the same IP addresses, because they post content in a coordinated way systematically. So it's again in the mindset of moving far from just the narrative analysis and include other ingredients in our analysis to prove that there is coordination, that there is an intention, that this has been planned. It's not a dissident content or alternative content. There can be alternative content and other voices. It's not about this. It's really about exposing an infrastructure that has been placed in purpose and using the same resources and the same strategy to filter content that comes from foreign actors. So I understand the concern, but yeah, with this analysis more of the technical patterns, and these are things that Intel and also cyber is doing. If we analyze better with the infrastructure, and by infrastructure I really see it like if it was a building. It's not about the colors that the building is using, but really how the pillars are put in place and how these networks are put in place. If we are able to explain that there are connections, then in this case is when we apply the classification of the exposure matrix, not just because there is a narrative that it has been shared by channels or organizations or people that they believe in this narrative. It's not about this.
Mm-hmm. Another attendee is curious to understand better how we distinguish between foreign and domestic influence campaigns. What are the differences, if any, in terms of identification, diagnosis, or response?
Okay. In our case, specifically because it's our mandate in the EEAS, we focus on the foreign part. I know that sometimes it can be difficult to draw this line, But that's why in our case, for example, the exposure matrix, it helps us, because what we do is we map the channels that we know that they are foreign. So we know that diplomatic accounts are foreign. We know that certain websites are foreign. If we look after at the interactions that these channels have with other channels, then there we know that there is a connection with the foreign actor. So in this way, it's easier to make this distinction of what's foreign and domestic, but we know that it doesn't work for all the cases, and sometimes it's a difficult question because in some cases the foreign activity is so embedded into a national and domestic landscape that is difficult to draw this line. But yeah, we created the exposure matrix as a way to in some cases make this division, or to better understand what has a foreign origin or it's connected to a foreign origin, and which campaigns or incidents we are not able to see any connection to a foreign origin. Therefore, they might be or they can be domestic.
Great. Another great question about the persistence of the operations despite increasing awareness of long-running operations such as doppelganger, portal combat, etc., etc. Why is it so difficult to disrupt or eliminate these elements from the FIMI ecosystem?
It's a really good question. So also, if you have an answer for us, no, there are of course in good results to do it, but maybe they are not enough. And this it's really a collaboration from different people in or different organizations. Us as a public institution, we cannot disrupt everything. Also, platforms, they have a role there. National governments, they have a role to play too. So it's really a coordination between different actors. So for example, yeah, the CIBs is something that the platforms, they can identify even better than us and control better. But then we have also all the means, all the ways to prevent that this content reaches audiences. But well, exposure, it's one way. That's why also the matrix, we call it exposure matrix and not attribution matrix, because we know that we can just attribute some of the channels, but it's not actually to attribute channels. But if we are able to attribute more, then we are able to have more legal even mechanisms to act. But yeah, I think as a community, we'll need to have also a larger discussion on the mechanisms that we put in place to evaluate how useful they are and how we adapt also our own mechanisms, because it's not just that because 3 years ago we created a mechanism that this will work forever. The media ecosystem of the FIMI architecture is volatile, it's dynamic, it changes. So we need to have an approach that it's also not able to implement something, but also after to be constantly adapting depending on the evolution of the FIMI activities.
Yeah, exactly. Because of that reason, because the threat actors have proven to be very able to adapt to the countermeasures. So we need to do the same. Next question. You talk about the majority of FIMI channels being single-use accounts and part of a disposable infrastructure. What is the goal of FIMI actors in operating disposable infrastructure? To obscure disinformation origins or network links?
I think there might be several objectives. The first one is the detection. If these are channels that are newly created, it's difficult that we saw them active before and that we have them in our radar. So it's a way to escape from early detection in some cases. Because yeah, we have more difficulty to attribute these CIBs when we don't have prior connections to other actors. I think this it's a way. But also another easy objective for them is to try to just boost the content really fast. and try to penetrate larger discussions. And so it's a way to give an easy or fast visibility to content. And yeah, the other, it's more a kind of a short-term strategy. It's not, there are other types of accounts that, for example, they are placed so the content, it stays online in multiple platforms. Here it's more to boost content, give visibility and once, and then disappear. So maybe if somebody else, or maybe the second layer of the ecosystem picks the content and enlarges in another sphere, then it will be more a long-term strategy. But I think specifically the use of CIBs is really just as a to boost in one moment content, and then with other accounts boost again. So I think it's part of a bigger puzzle.
The next question, it's a bit connected in terms of tactics. Federico is asking if, based on your findings on Russian and Chinese FIMI, are information laundering patterns that cut across various types of channels, more often opportunistic, for instance, event-driven, or systematic?
In the collusion between these two specific actors, we always said that it was more opportunistic. We just see it in some cases happening. These interactions mostly, and it's described in the report, they mutually amplify each other's content, and we say that it's opportunistically because it's not something that it happens always. We see that it happens when they have a goal in common, or, for example, that the narrative benefits both actors, or the narrative that they want to launch, it's shared. So probably we'll see more often this type of behavior in incidents that they have an anti-Western message, because it's a kind of a an aligned narrative that they both can have. And we see this between, for example, the exchanges between diplomatic accounts from both parts, but also how in some cases there might be state control Russian media outlets like RIA Novosti or RT or Sputnik, that they quote content from CGTN or Global Times. So it's more from state control to state control, and then sometimes through the usage of diplomatic accounts.
Next question is related to one of your comments during the presentation. Could you elaborate on the use of AI in FIMI operations? Would you assess that AI was not effective in making operations more impactful?
So the use of AI, we see it more and more often when it comes to the generation of content. So of course, more AI generated videos or images, also logos of displayed in different media outlets. Also, for example, with certain campaigns or operations where they launder content and they automatically translate it into other languages. So they use it to speed the production and translation of this content. When I said that we cannot, that we don't know or we cannot assess, it's because it's something that we did not investigate. So we cannot make a statement saying that because there is more AI, FIMI, it's more impactful. So it's just something that it's because we don't know, and I don't want to make that statement.
Okay, we have time for a very last question. Given the increasing convergence between Russian and Chinese influence operations, are we heading towards an axis of disinformation?
Okay. I don't know if we see an increasing convergence. I think this is something that we saw in the past years. Probably it's not new. Maybe it's just that with some geopolitical elements, it's more visible. But yeah, I don't know if we are going in that direction. I think it's we have every time more and more, let's say, actors or poles or different networks operating. So I don't think we can divide so clearly the world in two. I think there are many different players operating, and at the same time, in some cases, it's beneficial for them to be involved in the same case in one region, but then in another region it's something different. So I think it's more complex than that.
Okay, I'm so sorry to have to leave so many questions unanswered, but we don't have any more time. Thank you again, Beatriz, for these exciting discussions. I hope our audience has enjoyed and learned a lot. And we would like to get your feedback. You will be kindly requested to fill in a rating survey after the webinar ends. And you can also suggest topics to be covered in our next sessions. And before wrapping up, a quick reminder that the recording of this webinar will be available shortly on our YouTube channel, and that the early bird rates for our conference will end next Tuesday. Let me quickly announce the upcoming webinars. On the 28th of May, be careful because it will be on Wednesday instead of Thursday. We will have Camila Koroska from the University of Amsterdam speaking about how coordinated messaging mobilized rioters last summer in UK. 2 weeks later, on the 12th of June, we will have a webinar focused on legal obligations of governments in fighting disinformation to safeguard freedom of expression with Tarlag McGonagall from the University of Amsterdam as well. And the following week, on the 19th of June, we will have Bruce White from the Organization for Identity and Cultural Development, exploring practical strategies for countering identity-based disinformation. Thank you again, Beatriz. Thank you, Maria, our support behind the scenes. And thank you to everyone who attended today. Have a fantastic rest of the day and hope to keep seeing you around. Goodbye.